continuation with the series on economic sociology. In today's lecture, we're going to discuss on the concept of McDonaldization of society. Now, McDonaldization of society is a concept that kind of reflects the impact of economic change on society. Basically, we're going to explain how the fast food chain created a universal culture of rationality. So, in a way, the process helps us to understand social transformation with the emphasis on the growing importance of marketization and rationality in terms of structuring social relation. Now, in this lecture, we're going to understand what we mean by the term McDonaldization, and we're going to understand how it has kind of helped us to reconceptualize the relationship between economy and society. So, to begin with, McDonaldization is a term used to describe the penetration of American cultural and economic products throughout the world. It was developed by sociologist George Richter in his 1995 book, The McDonaldization of Society, an investigation into the changing character of contemporary society. So, to keep in mind that when we began with the series on economic sociology, we were trying to understand that the market became dominant and is one of the criteria to differentiate between traditional and modern society. Now, when we look into the modern society, a lot of study has been on the understanding the process of transformation. And where was this transformation located? It was located within the market, within the economic structure, and therefore the contribution of economic sociology is to bring forth how the change in economy also brought about associated change in social relations. So, to coming back to McDonaldization, we see that the sociologist Richter used the term to refer to a process through which certain principles of fast food management, such as efficiency, come to dominate the ethos of various sectors of society. Now, we all at some point of time or quite frequently have visited these number of food chains which has gone multiplied, but McDonald's was one of the initial food chains started in the 1990s in the United States, and the focus was to kind of be very efficient in terms of delivering the food to the customer. So, it was a kind of a change from the place where people went to the restaurant, gave an order and had to wait for some time before the dish was prepared. Now, here you have kind of efficiency coming in, and this efficiency is also kind of based on the idea of Fordism and scientific work management. But when we look into its impact on society, one of the things that comes into our mind is the fact that with McDonaldization, the culture has got homogenized. And this we see that in the later part of 20th century, the socially structured form of the fast food restaurant became the organizational force representing and extending the process of rationalization into the realm of everyday interaction and individual identity. Here, when we look into modernity and rationality, this process of McDonaldization becomes very important. And here we see that McDonaldization thesis is a cultural version of comparatively recent idea of the worldwide homogenization of culture. So, what McDonald's in Delhi would give you is the same product that you would get in any part of the world. So, the world becomes a kind of a similar or same across the societies. So, this concept helps us to understand that it is happening everywhere. its institutions and organizations are very similar. If you look into the structures of organization, it is the same, the hierarchy, the bureaucracy, and this has been adopted as a symbol of modernity to emphasize on efficiency, and efficiency would then kind of obviously lead to more profit. So, the profit would kind of gear towards capital accumulation. Now, when we look into Richard's concept of McDonaldization, it can be argued that his theory is an update on classical sociologist Max Weber theory of how scientific rationality produced bureaucracy, which became the central organizing force of modern society through much of the 20th century. So, if we go back to Weber, Max Weber's concepts and contribution to economic sociology, we are familiar with the fact that Weber stressed on the modern society emphasizing on rationality. The way in which the economic production or process takes place is based on rational thoughts. It cannot be kind of illogical or supernatural. So, Richter is building on the theory of rationality to explain to us the homogenization of culture. Now, when we go back to Max Weber, we see that Weber argued that modernity is characterized by instrumental reason with an increased efficiency on efficiency, control and use of technology. This was initiated by a decline in traditional authority and the influence of charismatic leaders. Now, if we again go back to Weber's theory, we know that he gave us three types of authority: the traditional authority, the charismatic authority and the rational authority. So, the emphasis is that modern society or modernity is characterized by rationality or rational forms of authority. The authority of rationality is based on rules and application of science, logic and reason. These rules are carried out by bureaucratic structure in which groups of people are organized into hierarchies, each having individual responsibility. So, there is kind of specialization and specialized division of labor. Now, this specialized division of labor is kind of also based on a hierarchical structure where it is actually ensuring that every individual contributes towards the efficiency of the system. So, according to Weber, the modern bureaucracy was defined by hierarchical roles, compartmentalized knowledge and roles, a perceived merit-based system of employment and advancement, and the legal rationality authority of the rule of law. This is how Weber was kind of creating an ideal type of bureaucracy to help understand the transformation from traditional society to a modern society. Now, if we can go back to Ridger and see how he kind of conceptualized rationalization, Rizzo was of opinion that individual must follow rules and regulations set by those who occupy a higher level in the hierarchy. Rizzo uses his McDonaldization model to demonstrate this rationalization process. The bureaucratic characteristic of fast food restaurant include a complex division of labor in which food is prepared elsewhere and delivered. A crew of laborers then perform a specific role repeatedly, such as cooking food and serving customers. Now, if we go to any McDonald's restaurant, we can see the hierarchy in terms of the uniform that they are many a time wearing. So, the hierarchy is essential for the system to give us efficient result, So, there is no kind of a waiting, you kind of have go and you will be delivered with your food. Now, when we try to understand McDonaldization, we are not here making an attempt to understand how efficiency has been achieved in a food chain restaurant or to understand whether there is a waiting time or not. As a sociologist, we try to understand the impact of any transformation on social relations, and how we are able to understand this transformation from a traditional society to a modern society. So much of the discussion in the 20th century was towards this emergence of a modern rational society. It is here where we can fix in McDonaldization as a phenomena of modern globalization, which is established and reproduced due to the communication links of different parts of the world, although in different socio-cultural contexts it has its own peculiarities. Ritzer wrote that this is a process in which the principle of fast food restaurant operations are beginning to define a growing number of areas of life, not only in the restaurant business but also in education, labor, healthcare, tourism, recreation, politics. Virtually every segment of the society was influenced by the work culture of McDonald, and therefore the term McDonaldization. Richter in particular described higher education in the Western world as already quite McDonaldized, thanks to the emergence of macro universities where textbooks and teaching aids are increasingly reminiscent of macro text, which can quickly achieve the desired result. So with the help of technology, social media, we know that even the institutions of education is easily now accessible at any corner of the world. The direct interaction between teacher and student is minimized. So you want to kind of learn any part of your syllabus, and you go to the social media or to the search engine, and you are able to find n number of study notes and study material. So the physical interaction between the teacher and the student is minimized. American sociologist F. Jameson noted in his paper that some factors indicated that McDonaldization transformation as a rational paradigm was the characteristic of postmodern society. Every segment of society has been influenced by the symbol of McDonald. That is, the focus has shifted to efficiency, regulation, control, and that is how we kind of understand a postmodern society. Now, here are some of the explanation of how we look into McDonaldization as a rational paradigm. First, McDonaldized institutions and adequate micro-social practices become global in nature. Second, McDonaldized products and service represent a good example of similar and creates a kind of hyper-reality through the atmosphere of euphoria. McDonaldization offered some impressive advantages. However, by removing the human factor, in particularly in education and human factor from social practices, it generated irrational rationality that manifested itself in the alienation of human mind. So we know that there was too much of rationality, and when we are too rational and we are kind of doing everything through a rational, we are caught up in the kind of an iron cage where even the rational way of action, rationality, leads to certain negative consequences. So when we try to understand the process, we know that Ritzer uses 4 key principles to help us understand the process of McDonaldization. What are these 4 principles or dimensions? These are efficiency, calculability, predictability, and control through non-human technology. These lie at the heart of the success of McDonald and more generally of all McDonaldized system. So McDonald is only symbolic. It was kind of one of the initial fast food chain which emphasized on efficiency and was able to successfully spread into different realm, into different segment and across the globe. And that is where we will try to understand how these 4 principles are the key characteristic of postmodern society. Ritzer argues that McDonald and other McDonaldized systems have succeeded because they offer consumers, workers and managers the advantage of these. So, it is not only the one category which is achieving advantage, there are different stakeholders which are but later we will also discuss how this advantage over a period of time kind of leads to the disadvantage, and therefore, the use of the phrase the irrationality of rationality. Efficiency is the first principle. And what is efficiency? It is the optimal method for accomplishing a task. Ritter has a very specific meaning of efficiency. He spells it that it is simply the fastest method to get from point A to point B. That is, how fast can you achieve your goal. So, in McDonaldization, efficiency means that every aspect of the organization is geared towards the minimization of time. And if we look at from a customer perspective, say a customer comes to a McDonald's restaurant, what would the efficiency imply? Here the efficiency would imply the fastest way to get from being hungry to being full. And this is what the way they kind of sell out their product or represents the product is that there is complete satisfaction for the customer who comes in as hungry and finally feels completely full. Individuality is not allowed. Instead of choosing your own method of efficiency, you are forced to accept the efficiency of the surrounding institutions. Ritter uses the example of a salad bars where customer buy an empty plate, go to the bar and create the salad himself or herself. And he explains it that this is very efficient for the restaurant but makes more work for the consumer. In other words, you have to pay for the privilege of making your own salad, but then you don't have to wait for somebody else to, and if there is a queue of 4 more customer, you have the possibility of getting your own salad at the earliest. The second principle is calculability. Calculability emphasizes the quantitative aspect of the product sold, such as the portion, size or price and services offered, how quickly someone can get the product. McDonaldization developed the notion that quantity equals quality and that a large amount of product delivered to the customer in a short amount of time is the same as a high quality product. For example, the McDonald's dollar menu quantifies both a low cost and the feeling that people are getting a lot of food for a small sum of money. So, if you look into the advertisements of these food chain, that is kind of quantifying, for the people are not going into the quality of it. It's more in terms of how much you can get at a lower price. So, this allows people to quantify how much they are getting versus how much they are repaying. Workers in these organizations are judged by how fast they accomplish tasks instead of the quality of work they do. So, each of the workers have a target to meet, and every month if we go, we see the best workers award being made. Now, this best workers award is a motivation to ensure that each worker is able to move more than the target assigned to him or her. And that is what would that ensure? That a larger quantity of the product is being sold across the counter, and that is will at the end add to the profit margin of the food chain. Now, this relates to the idea of availability versus variety. You can get a lot of one thing, but not necessarily the thing you want. So, increase of volume does not equate to increase in choice. Now, they are kind of already decided menus. They have already created these menus. Many of the time they are semi cooked. So, there is not much chance to explore, but then since many a time the customer says that the volume is more at a smaller price, the choice is compromised. Consumers can also make calculations in terms of time. They may calculate consciously or not how much time it would take to go to a McDonald's, be served food, eat it, and return home in comparison to the time required to prepare food at home. Ritzer argues that this is important to other food delivery chains, say pizza restaurant, as well as brands that emphasize obtaining any good or service quickly, such as fast fashion. Now, if we look into the way the online marketing or online food delivery chains are operating, they are giving us a certain time which is prefixed, and if they don't deliver, then they are also the claim of returning back the money and so on. So, basically consumers are more ready to spend this because obviously the time that is more limited with them is more valuable, and therefore the success of the food chain business. Workers within McDonaldized system emphasize the quantitative rather than the qualitative aspect of their work. Because the quality of work must be uniform, workers focus on how quickly tasks can be accomplished. Now, there is no chance of improving quality of your work because you are pre-assigned the work that you have to done, and all workers are doing almost the same nature of work. So, how do you show your efficiency? By increasing the quantity of work that you do. Ritzer argued that digital services such as Facebook and Amazon are heavily McDonaldized, and that calculability aspect of McDonaldization has been enhanced by big data. The third principle of McDonaldization is predictability. McDonaldization is also built on predictability, meaning that the product and services will be more or less the same over time and in all locations. Predictability, which means that no matter where a person goes, they will receive the same service and the same product every time when interacting with the McDonaldized organization. McDonald's hamburgers should be virtually identical today in New York as they will be next week in London. Consumers, according to Ritzer, take comfort in knowing that McDonald's offers no surprises. This also applies to the workers in these organizations. Their tasks are highly repetitive, routinized, and predictable. A Big Mac is a Big Mac, and it will remain a Big Mac across the globe and across time. Some people like this predictability because you can predict what would you consume, how much time it would take, and even to a large extent the taste of these products, and argue that it is a good thing. You don't have to worry about eating a bad burger. So, you are not doing any kind of experiment. You are familiar with the taste, and you are sure that you will again get the same taste by going to a McDonald's restaurant, and that is the reason that you don't need to kind of go to any other food chain to experiment. Workers don't have to worry about thinking for themselves. They will have the time to concentrate on other things while they go through the motion of performing their jobs. But is this predictability better? When you travel to a different area, do you want the experience to be the same? If you are in France and touring the city of Paris, do you really want to eat at a McDonald's that you had already had in India or any other part of the world? So, this predictability kind of negates the idea of changing your taste or experimenting with taste. Does that detract from the whole experience of a different culture? The fourth element of McDonaldization is control, and this is exerted over the people who enter a McDonald's. Control over both employer and customer, because people are the great source of uncertainty, unpredictability, and inefficiency in any rationalizing system. Control is achieved by a standardized and uniform employees or the replacement of human by non-human technology. The substitution of more predictable non-human labor for human labor, either through automation or de-skilling of the workforce. The lines, limited options, and uncomfortable seats of McDonald's encourages customer to eat quickly and leave. Workers in McDonaldized organization are also controlled. These employees are trained to do a limited number of tasks in exactly the way they had to do. So we get a lot of example of McDonaldization, and we see the Amazon is kind of the largest database of item that they sell, and it includes from grocery to digital content. So it's also built on the principle of efficiency, predictability and control. So when we look into the idea of McDonaldized, we see that it has created kind of a universalized efficiency built model, but there are also kind of certain disadvantages and the way in which consumers had got trapped into an iron cage. In the next part of the lecture, we will discuss the advantage and disadvantage of McDonaldization. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.